Hello and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm Edgar Wiggins, your host for this program that is dedicated to providing you with practical and useful information regarding mental health and related issues. It has long been recognized that people with lived experience can make excellent peer recovery advocates and supporters for those who are dealing with mental illnesses and substance use disorders. Here to talk about this, we have with us this morning Brandy Izquierdo, who is a peer recovery support specialist for the Carroll County Health Department, and Denise Camp, who is a project coordinator for the Wellness and Recovery Program. Good morning and welcome to Mental Health Matters.
Good
Thank you,
morning.
Edgar.
Okay, Brandy, let's start with you. Can you talk a little bit about the journey that has led you to this point in your career?
Yes, I absolutely can. A lot of it had to do with jails and institutions. I was a mother of 4 children. I had a lot of background with domestic violence. And rather than dealing with mental health, I used substances to self-medicate. And from there, I found myself literally in a jail cell. And I actually had a judge who cared enough to hand me a rope, and I had a choice. I could either climb up or hang myself. And I chose to climb up. And from there, I started the process of recovery. I dove into my own fellowship. I learned I learned the tools and the skills needed to go through life. And with that, there were still a lot of wreckages that I needed to clean up from my past through recovery, and I was still facing jail time clean. And from there, I lost my children. I wasn't able to see them for a long time. And I knew there was a different way, and I chose to follow that path. And in turn, I was hired by the Carroll County Health Department. I did a lot of the training. I actually did some of the training through Denise's program, the RAP program. And I just advocate for others now because there is a way out and there is hope. And that's what I want to send the message out, that there is hope, that there is a different way of life. And you can become a productive member of society.
Thank you. Denise, and for you?
For me, my journey with mental health issues began when I was young. I did manage to get through school and had a very promising engineering career when I ended up in the hospital for several months and ended up losing my job. I was on disability for a long period of time. And then with the help of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, some of their consumer education programs, and the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, WRAP, that Brandy mentioned, it really helped move me forward in my recovery with the 5 key concepts, one of them being personal responsibility, to be able to know that other people couldn't recover for me, that recovery is work, and that I had to do the work to recover for myself, allowed me to start to get to this point. And talking about peer support, there were 2 people who really kind of helped me get started. One was a woman named Pat Deegan, and she lived with schizophrenia but went on to get a PhD and now is one of the leading speakers on peer support in the country. And I remember seeing her while I was attending a psych rehab program, and I just thought that, wow, that's so cool. A person that lives with a mental illness can do this stuff, because I didn't think that we could. We were told we couldn't. And there she was in front of 600 people, talking about her experience. And I thought, oh, I could never do that. That's so cool. And someone who supported me said, sure, you could do that. And the woman who had the position that I had at On Our Own of Maryland before, who brought RAP to the state of Maryland, Cheryl Sharp, who's now at the National Council, I looked up to her thinking, wow, I really want to do that when I grow up, so to speak. And she mentored me, she supported me. we had a very intentional peer support relationship. There were specific things I could come to her about with her information, her lived experience with mental health and substance use disorder, being able to help me, knowing my story. And that allowed me to be able to apply for her position when it became open. And I'm now doing something that I had never expected or thought. If I had written the story, it couldn't have come out better.
Thank you. Back to you, Brandy. Why is it important from your perspective, or what's different that people with lived experience bring to the helping relationship that some other helper might not?
Well, for me, what I can bring to it is that empathy. You know, I've been there, I've done that. I tell a lot of people, you know, a lot of times substance abuse is a disease of the feelings, and we don't know how to describe those feelings or understand what we're going through. And to actually have someone with lived experience who has gone through it and can say, I'm not going through what you're going through now, but I've been through it, and I can relate to how you feel, it makes a whole world of difference. In the same respect too, actually, you know, when you're telling you something that you know is not true, you can actually say something to them and not necessarily confront them, but say, I know that that's not the truth. So let's talk about that and why you're not telling the truth, because it is an honest program. And Denise mentioned accountability and responsibility and understanding that no one else can recover for you, but we can guide you through that process because we've been there.
So basically, what you're bringing to the transaction is a real, basically, I've been there, I know what you're going through. This isn't something that I read about or took a course on or was part of my professional training. You know, I've been where you are. And that, I would think, would make you a much more credible resource for people.
And not just credible, but maybe trusting, you know, because if I've been, you know, in the psych ward in lockdown, if I've lost my children because of my substance use disorder, if I've been arrested because I was participating in an activity that the voices in my head were telling me was okay, that's much different than having the experience from, like you said, the kind of book educational area. I know what it's like to have the cops come to my door and say, we're taking you to the hospital, or to have been in handcuffs or watch your children being taken away from you. Mm-hmm. And that empathy and that being able to build that relationship on trust and knowledge, because we have similar backgrounds, we've had similar experiences, allows us to go where maybe a therapist or a psychiatrist or a social worker ethically is not able to go.
Okay. What's been the response to your work by the mental health or behavioral health community? How has our field responded to what you have to offer?
I think for me, in the beginning, the response was a bit of a pushback in the beginning because of the counselor or therapeutic value, as opposed to, they didn't know what it was. And a lot of times if you don't know what it is, it's again fear, are you going to take my job? But rather what we do is we enhance that job. When I deal a lot with the drug court clients, and I also deal with pregnant addicts. And when they come in and they are either diagnosed or they have a treatment plan set up, we are the ones that will step up to the plate and enhance that by allowing them to say, or helping them get their license and actually taking them and transporting them. But it's really not about the transportation as much as it is about standing in the MVA line and not getting frustrated and irritated and feeling like everyone's against you and just walking out and not getting the job done. We actually stand by their side teach them through the process of recovery that this is the way the system works, and let's work through it, not against it.
So you, in that regard, are really acting as a real-world support for that person.
Absolutely.
Because given the way things are in our field, we know that a therapist is not going to be able to go with somebody to the MVA. But that's a role that you fulfill. The other thing that strikes me from hearing what both of you say is that you're also a real-life model of how things can be.
Yeah, actually, my role models, my peer supporters, when I got started, really were a role model. They were a role model of how to handle adversity when you're not feeling well, what you do to help yourself feel well. And that's where the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, WRAP, really came in for me, is that I was feeling okay, but I wasn't consistent with kind of my self-care. And WRAP allows me to develop a plan to help myself stay well and be well for long periods of time. And by facilitating the process with another person, helping them find what works for them, allows them to be able to move forward in their recovery however they define it.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about the idea of recovery versus the idea of therapy and treatment. When you talk about recovery, that's a very different perspective than some of us with clinical training have learned. So what's the difference?
For me, recovery is what a person defines it to be, that it's not necessarily my getting back everything I had before. If that's the goal that I have for my recovery, maybe the goal for my recovery is changing the tone of the voices that I hear. Because maybe I'm not gonna get rid of the voices, but I can work with the voices. The voices, instead of telling me negative things, if I do some work to have some more positive affirmations in my life, perhaps my recovery can be the voices are more positive in my life as opposed to negative and destructive, and causing me to do negative and destructive things, or keeping me from doing any positive things.
Okay, we're going to come back to this because this is very important, but we need to take a short break right now, and we'll be right back.
This is the moment I knew. His future had no boundaries.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.
They said I couldn't dream. Called me a piece of trash and swore that's all I'd ever be. Said a bottle couldn't see the ocean. Give up. Go back to the dumpster. But I didn't listen. I made my way. And now, I am what I've always wanted to be.
We're back at Mental Health Matters. Today we're joined by Brandy Izquierdo, who is a peer recovery support specialist for the Carroll County Health Department, and Denise Camp, who is the project coordinator for the Wellness and Recovery Program. Before the break, Denise, we were talking about sort of your concept, your perspective on recovery and what that's like. Can you just kind of finish your thought there with that?
Yes. Another thing about recovery, it needs to be person-centered, that the person has to be involved in what defines their recovery and the treatment process for that. And it's different for different people depending on what they're recovering from. I myself have a mental health issue and some addiction issues, but also some somatic health issues. And my recovery may look very different from Brandy's recovery. And the important part is that the recovery process be self-directed and person-centered, that previously we have been left out of our treatment plans, that we were told what to do and this is how we're going to get well. Well, we know ourselves better than anyone else, and we know some of the things that work for us. And having that input into our recovery plan really helps make it more person-centered. I'm also invested now in my recovery because I'm not being told what to do, I'm being asked, how can we help? What can we do to help you in your recovery? And especially as a peer specialist, those are the kind of questions that I ask.
But it also sounds like it's holistic because you're talking about really three areas that interact with each other. So it's the mental health concerns, the substance abuse issues, but also somatic health. And one of the things that we know is that there is interaction and synergy in those areas. For instance, if somebody's got diabetes and they don't manage that, and they've got a mental illness, your blood sugar drops, you're going to feel pretty doggone depressed. So that is a very important perspective as well, really being able to manage those components so that when we talk about wellness, we're really talking about an overall perspective. Brandy?
Yeah, and then it's the same thing with me as far as a person-centered recovery approach. For me, I do more of a holistic approach with my mental health. I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, and my problem is my substance abuse aspect of things comes into play more than the anxiety.